TFMA Challenge Forum. I am happy to introduce our next presenting team from the University of Michigan Ann Arbor and their presentation on AMAZE, a unified GUI for FMDS.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sinan Abdulhaq. I'm an industrial engineering major, and I spent 11 months as a co-op with Delta's air traffic management team.
Hello, my name is Tyler Cravetti, and I am a recent graduate from the School of Information, specializing in information analysis.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Shen, and I'm also a recent graduate with a degree in art and design and a UX minor.
Our faculty advisor is Dr. Maxley, and we are so excited to present our research prototype demo and prototype demo of AMAZE, a unified GUI for FMDS.
So before we get started today, I want to tell you a short story that happened to me exactly 5 weeks ago. So I was going from RSW, Fort Myers, to LaGuardia in New York City. And what happened was everything was going super smoothly. I was thinking to myself, fantastic. No one's sitting to me next to the plane. Everyone's is on time, and we're about to depart and arrive early. But, you know, life is not that simple. So I ended up being on a plane for more than an hour, and the captain took over the intercom, and he was like, sorry, folks, but we're waiting for a new reroute for our plane due to weather reasons. And immediately I texted our group, and I was like, guys, I know something that might help us speed up this delay process. So that being said, we're super honored to be here to present to you guys of our design for FMDS. And for the past 6 months, we have been tackling the problem of how the current TFMS has 20 plus interfaces and it creates a tedious AFP workflow for the current NTMSs and is running on a legacy infrastructure. So our job has been to design a user-centered GUI for FMDS that unifies different tools and is backed by user interviews of the FAA and industry stakeholders. So in our presentation today, we're going to present some of the user research, design iterations, and an interactive prototype.
Let's kick things off by talking about our user research methods. Now, we conducted a lot of interviews, and although we didn't get a single job offer, we did get rich user feedback from FAA and industry stakeholders. We connected deeply with traffic managers like Jen Ross and TFMS subject matter expert Kurt Kaler to understand their needs, how they collaborate with colleagues, and pain points with the current interface. And we didn't stop there. We engaged with airline operators like Delta to determine where NAS customers fit into the interface, and we vetted our design concepts with NASA, which included human factors engineers and former ATD2 analytics leads.
Let's move on to the 3 most prevalent takeaways from these interviews. The first takeaway is that the current TFMS interface and workflow is disjointed, leading to NTMS's triaging tasks. Our user research shows TFMS consists of over 20 interfaces. This large quantity adds clutter and creates confusion for NTMS, and every time users jump between applications is an opportunity for error or distraction. We found that when NTMS are overwhelmed, logging for NTML purposes falls down their priority list, and it can even be forgotten. We also found that NTMS use Zoom, phone, and email, where jumping between these applications is yet another opportunity for error or distraction. Our next takeaway is how interconnected the NAS is. To create an interface to replicate the AFP workflow, our team had to really understand how NTMS work with AFPs. We learned that there are many NAS constraints involved in determining the need for an AFP, weather being one of them. We also learned how AFPs work alongside other TMIs, such as ground stops and GDPs. All this goes to show that when working with AFPs, NTMS must be focused on numerous aspects at once. The final takeaway is how impact summaries can be a key decision support tool for NTMS. We learned that the ability to summarize AFP impacts, such as delay metrics, support NTMS in making informed decisions as quickly as possible. Another finding is how the command center has a higher level view than facilities, and that they view NAS-wide constraints.
So, as Tyler has mentioned just now, we have learned a lot from our takeaways. So from there, we developed a problem statement and worked towards our solution. So the problem statement is as follows. TFMS's 20+ interface environment creates an inconsistent, tedious user experience for an NTMS's AFP workflow that lacks cohesiveness among the application's tools, compounded by extensive user training requirements that lack modern user experience design heuristics. So as we have mentioned briefly, the current TFMS users are experiencing an overload of 20+ interfaces, which leads to extensive training requirements. They also had to repeatedly input the same information into different areas on TFMS, while also had to free text log for NTML. And lastly, the multiple disconnected communication channels can lead to information dispersed across different multiple channels, such as like Zoom, email, or phone calls. So in an ideal situation, the future FMDS users will have one interface that combines several functionalities. It will have a learnable GUI that is easy for onboarding. It will also have automation-assisted NTML for decreased logging burden, especially during peak workload hours. And lastly, they'll have a collaboration tool centralized for communication channel across the FMDS in order to share information easily with other personnel and facilities. In order to close the gap between the current state and the future state, we're going to introduce our product, Amaze.
Let's talk about Amaze, our interactive user-centered GUI concept for FMDS. It unifies vital traffic management tools under one interface and streamlines the AFP workflow for NTMSs. With user needs driving every design decision, we've developed an interface to address the pain points of traffic managers, minimize user training, and strengthen collaborative decision-making, or CDM. It also meets all requirements stated in the FAA's TFM-8 handbook. Our user interviews allowed us to really understand traffic managers and their AFP workflow. And from that, we designed 3 core functionalities that together create an enhanced yet familiar AFP workflow tailored to NTMSs. It begins with evaluating AFP need by viewing weather, rocket launches, and other NAS constraints. After AFP need has been established, users can model an AFP with shareable impact statistics and revamped FSM graphs. Lastly, users can monitor their AFPs and other FEAs or FCAs with user-centered viewing modes. Let's take a closer look at these 3 core functionalities, starting with evaluating. In evaluating, users can overlay NAS constraints on an expansive TSD style map. We learned from Jen Ross, a former command center traffic manager, that severe weather plays a key role in determining AFP need. So we've included a playback feature that allows you to see how NAS constraints, including weather, are changing over time with customizable forecast durations. We also learned that users often use pre-existing FEAs and FCAs, so you can access those via our search bar, or you can draw a custom one with our drawing tool. Lastly, we have a constraint summary, which shows you how NAS constraints are impacting a specific ARTC. Next, let's talk about modeling. We learned from Jen Ross, a former command center traffic manager, that when modeling AFPs, command center NTMSs begin with a baseline proposal and tinker on it to create revisions. That's exactly how Amaze's modeling feature works, so it'll feel familiar, and you'll see this more in action later in our interactive demo. A data card summarizes how AFP proposals will impact flights, and users can pair a proposal with another TMI or share it via our built-in collaboration feature. Lastly, let's talk about monitoring. Users can take advantage of our multi-FSM plot view to quickly launch up to 8 FSM graphs at once and leverage presets to save frequently viewed regions of airspace together. To accommodate different viewing preferences, we've included several viewing modes, and users can see AFP revision history. They can revise or purge AFPs, all directly from monitoring.
We'd like to highlight 2 more features Amaze has to offer, starting with our drawing tool. Similar to Adobe's Pen tool, our drawing tool allows NTMS to draw FEA or FCA lines, as well as segmented AFPs, then input parameters to view a data card summarizing the demand capacity impact. It's adjusted by NASA's Human Factors team. This tool helps facilitate evaluation of the NAS. To add support for segmented AFPs, we interviewed Jen Ross, a ZJX ATM who helped design the segmented AFP strategy.
Another feature that we decided to incorporate into FMDS is the collaboration tool. And you might be familiar with like Zoom, Microsoft Teams, email, etc. And we took a lot of inspiration from those. So you might be wondering to yourself, then why do we need another collaboration tool in FMDS if we have so many other resources, right? So our reasoning is that rather than having the NTMS navigate themselves across different collaboration platforms, they can easily share information with other personnel in facilities without having their own workflow being interrupted. And we're going to show some more features in our demonstration later.
So speaking of that, who's ready for an interactive demonstration of a maze?
Woo.
Yeah. All right, so just to start, a maze is a 2-monitor application. Throughout this demonstration, you'll see us switch between the left monitor, which is currently shown, and the right monitor. Not much is going on right now, but sit tight, things will soon change. For now, let's go back to the left monitor to talk about our dashboard. Dashboard provides concise NAS updates in one place. NTMS can view information from the NAS status dashboard, which is familiar to many users, as well as a weather forecast map with CloudTops. Hyperlinks to vital resources such as the ops plan and playbook are included, as well as frequently used weather tools such as the Aviation Weather Center portal. Dashboard also allows NTMS to prepare for their day. On the right, a schedule depicts upcoming meetings. And to help plan meetings, users can view colleagues' schedule through search. I'd like to move on to evaluating, where NTMS evaluate NAS constraints and identify demand capacity imbalances. Using the global navigation bar, let's access our map view, and we'll search for the Jacksonville constraint summary. All constraints affecting ZGX are neatly summarized, where users can select a checkbox to view the airway closures due to that constraint. On the left, you'll see our layers tool. This tool is used to overlay NAS constraints onto the TSD style map. Users can make selections more granular for some categories. For example, you can select between different aircraft categories. You may also notice how we've included UAVs, as we've learned these are gaining increasing prevalence as a NAS constraint. But for now, let's select weather, rocket launches, and military airspaces. And now we can see these are overlaid on the map. Perfect. Next, I'd like to talk to you about our drawing tool, which is used to draw custom FEA or FCA lines. With every click, a line segment is drawn where there is an undo feature included in case users make a mistake. Let's complete our drawing and hit done. At this point, NTMS do have the ability to make a line segmented, but we won't do this for now. Let's give our FEA a name, and after inputting parameters, hit done. You'll notice that 3 things happened. First, a visual depiction of the FEA line is shown, its name, and a data card summarizing metrics about air traffic passing through FEA 001. Let's go ahead and take a look at what's going on the right monitor. You'll see that a data card has now populated with details such as rate, where NTMS can also click on this button to view a corresponding FSM graph. But let's go back to the left monitor.
Hey, Tyler, that weather does not look good at all. We should probably tell someone about. It looks like someone beat me to it. We've just received a chat message from the Jacksonville thread alerting us of that weather in the southeast. Let's click on this chat message to be taken to the thread where the conversation is unfolding. All right, so looking at that weather and that rocket launch, I'm feeling the pit in my stomach. I think we're going to need to model an AFP. But before we do that, let's clean up our workspace by hitting remove card, going back to the left monitor, and switching over to modeling. In modeling, we have all the tools at our fingertips needed to find the right solution to that demand capacity imbalance. Now, we've demonstrated how you can draw a custom FEA or FCA using our drawing tool, but what if you wanted to search for an existing one? Well, you can do that right up here. Let's search for Jack 7, one which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with. Let's input our rates, starting with a 79 rate and other model parameters, and hit Add Proposed AFP. Immediately, we get a data card summarizing how our AFP proposal will impact flights, and that red text there tells us that we haven't addressed the demand capacity imbalance. Let's check out what happened on the right side. On the right monitor, we get an expanded data card, and we can see an FSM graph. Let's go back to the left monitor. Now, what if we wanted to tinker on our baseline proposal, say change the rate? Well, we can do that right here. Let's change the rate from 79 to 94 and hit Add Proposed AFP. Right away, we get an updated data card for this revised proposal, and the green text tells us that we've addressed the demand capacity imbalance. Let's go to the right monitor, and we see that we get another data card for that revised proposal, and we notice that it has a blue outline, which tells us that this data card is selected. Now, when a data card is selected, you can do a couple things. First, you can pair the proposal with another TMI, or share it via our built-in collaboration feature. Kate, tell us more about the collaboration feature.
Yeah, so as we have talked briefly in our presentation, our collaboration feature helps the NTMS workflow to be not interrupted. So in this case, let's share this data card into the ZJX channel, and the person can do so by easily clicking on the share button. And let's say the user wants to schedule a meeting to talk about this data card. They can do so easily by clicking on the schedule meeting button here, or we added a feature called the hotkeys feature, where the person can type in /schedule-meeting. And by clicking enter on the keyboard, this pop-up will appear in the text box, and the user can send the meeting into the ZJX channel. And while we're on the topic of hotkeys, let's navigate ourselves to the settings menu, where users can add more hotkeys, customize their notifications, their map view, or their user profile. And like many other applications that we're familiar with, such as Zoom, people can easily join calls by clicking on the join call button here, mute themselves or unmute themselves, share their screen if they have to, or exit their call.
Thanks, Kate. It looks like this AFP proposal will work. So we have two options for implementation. First, we can schedule the AFP to be implemented for a later time, or we can implement it immediately with that green button. Let's click the green button, and we get a confirmation window to finalize details for implementation. Here, we can finalize the end time for the AFP, and when we hit that implement button, Amaze will automatically push an AFP create message to NTML. But we have this optional text box for more details. Let's type in some rationale and hit implement. Now we're back on the left monitor in the monitoring workflow, and we see an FSM graph of that AFP that we just made. Now let's talk about NTML for a moment. We know NTML is vital for cross-facility coordination and for receiving updates on happenings in the NAS. We've made NTML easy to access by having it live on the bottom left of the monitor, and a blue circle gently notifies users of the number of new messages in NTML since they last viewed it. Let's click on NTML to expand it, and we see our AFP create message right there, the second tile. We can click on the tile to expand it and see that rationale that we typed in that optional text box. In NTML, we can also search for keywords. Let's search for Mile and Trail, issued by New York Center. There it is. Let's close out of NTML and talk about some of our options for viewing FSM graphs in monitoring. We've created a multi-FSM plot view functionality, which allows you to quickly launch up to 8 FSM graphs at once. Let's click on multi-FSM plot view to open the tool, and we can manually search and add different FEAs and FCAs via this search button here. Let's add a couple. And once we're happy with our selection, let's hit view plots. Switching over to the right monitor, we see all 6 plots right there displayed. Now let's talk about some of the improvements we've made to FSM graphs in Amaze. First, we've increased font sizes to make FSM graphs more readable and reduce visual clutter by removing grid lines. And we use color thoughtfully to convey meaning or attract attention when necessary. And if users forget what a color means, they can look at this legend. Now let's talk about some of the different viewing modes in monitoring. Currently shown as default mode, but we also have theater mode, which enlarges one FSM graph while keeping others in view for a quick comparison. And we can also full screen a graph to view 18 hours of data simultaneously. As with any graph in Amaze, users can toggle forwards or backwards in time and view up to 3 days of flight data in advance. Let's exit out of the full screen mode and wrap up our interactive prototype with the final button here in the global navigation bar. This data links feature informs the user of the status of data flows. Green indicates that the data connection is good, while red indicates that there's an issue with the data stream. And with that, that wraps up our interactive demo. It's back over to you, Tyler.
Thank you. After creating our interactive prototype, we tested our product on stakeholders to receive user feedback and improve Amaze. In our user test with Ralph Tamburo, he found our multi-FSM plot view to be definitely valuable, especially in the command center. He also emphasized how Amaze is much better than the current system. In our user test with Bill Tuck and Jason Conley from Delta's OCC, they mentioned how intuitive our interface is thanks to the use of familiar icons. We confirmed our interface is readable on 24-inch monitors and received validation for our theater mode, as it currently replicates what Bill Tuck does manually with FSM boards. Our user tests also uncovered usability improvements we've since incorporated into Amaze. Ralph Tamburo suggested adding an undo feature to our drawing tool and allowing NTMS to access our full screen mode using the viewing mode drop-down menu. In our user test with Bill Tuck and Jason Conley, we learned that adding a dismiss button would help NTMS avoid notification fatigue with NTML, and that the ability to view 8 to 12 hours simultaneously, rather than the 4 we currently display, would be ideal for FSM graphs, which takes us into our next steps.
All right, starting with our short-term goals for next steps, we'd shrink the widths of the bars in our FSM graphs so we can display 8 to 12 hours of data simultaneously. We'd create onboarding wireframes and an airline view of Amaze to help clarify which aspects of our interface are accessible to non-FAA stakeholders, and we would continue to conduct user testing. Switching over to our long-term goals, we collaborate with software developers to determine the feasibility of our design and make design tweaks accordingly to help speed up that development process. And once Amaze is developed, we'd conduct a pilot test of our product, incorporating user feedback before FMDS implementation by fall of 2028.
So, in conclusion, we have introduced our design, Amaze, which is a unified GUI for FMDS that addresses the many concerns that the current TFMS has. And we have conducted a lot of extensive user research to design our user-centered product through a user experience and user interface standpoint. Amaze has been designed through an iterative design process, and we have addressed our short-term and long-term next steps, highlighting future developments to make our application even better.
This is an exciting time for the FAA. In combination with FMDS, Amaze represents an opportunity to drastically improve the experience for NTMSs working with AFPs, with the potential to influence the design of other traffic management interfaces. We're overwhelmed with feedback from delighted traffic managers like Ralph and enthusiasm from Bill and Jason of Delta Airlines, and we know that's just the start. Thank you. And sorry, real quick, I see we have 2 minutes left. So sorry, I just want to use that extra time to go to our acknowledgement slide. This has been a colossal effort and we could not have done this alone. So I just want to highlight all of these incredible people that we've gotten to know and helped us out throughout the whole project and made our journey so enjoyable. You'll see folks from Delta Airlines represented. I think Aaron Cobbett's watching, so thank you so much for your help, as well as Bill and Jason. Jen Ross from the former Command Center Traffic Manager, currently at Jacksonville Center. Ralph, I mean, and if you go on to the next slide, our friends at NASA over here, and there's just so many incredible people that have made our journey so enjoyable. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor team. We'll go to our judging panel first for our questions. Judges, do you have questions for the team?
Guess I'll go first this time. The one thing I noticed, I said they must know the FAA when it said, "Are you sure you want to implement the additional pop-up message?" So I was like, that's cool. I liked your presentation. I do have one question about the directional. I noticed that you only had the AFP going one directional. Are you able to do multiple directional? And will it implement and give you that same information?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thank you so much for your question. Just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, are you asking about AFP, the direction right here? Yes. So the interaction for this one is you have arrows kind of going in the different directions, and then when it's dark or you see it in that black color, that's the direction that's selected. The grayed out colors are not selected, so you do have the ability to select different directions.
Multiple directions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, and actually in this example, we have the north, northeast, and northwest selected.
Hey, great job, everyone. I have a question about the different modes. So right now you're showing monitoring mode. I know there's also a evaluating mode and a modeling mode, right? So what, I didn't quite catch, what are the differences and the importance of those modes?
Exactly. So thank you so much for your question. With the different viewing with the three core functionalities, we learned from our user interviews that this is how NTMSs kind of flow through the day of working with AFPs. So they begin by establishing the need for an AFP. So that's looking at those NAS constraints. That's what the evaluating core functionality is. After that need for the AFP has been established, they can move on to that monitoring, or sorry, the modeling core functionality. And that's where they model the AFP. They find the right solution. And then after that AFP has been implemented, they can monitor the AFP. That's kind of, I guess you could think of it as like your heart rate monitor. You've already created your solution and you're seeing how it's performing. And so you can kind of gauge to see, do I need to make any revisions to my AFP? Is it doing well? You know, can I cancel it early and whatnot?
So what would the traffic manager do in kind of a more dynamic situation where they might be kind of in two of those modes at the same time? Would they have different instances of the application up, maybe different browser windows, one in evaluating, one in monitoring that?
Yeah, so if this were to be a cloud-based implementation and this were to be open in a web browser, there could certainly be a scenario where they have more than one workflow or more than one screen open in different core functionalities. They can also easily switch between workflows just via that dropdown that's always accessible in the global navbar. And Kate and Tyler, did you have anything else to add? Sorry, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So the functions that are available in each are a little bit different.
Exactly, and it's tailored to kind of which phase of the process that they're in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I loved your use of color. I loved your research that informed the problem and helped you shape the solution. Excellent work on the research among other things. And the one question I had was about your communications idea and the idea of channels and sharing of things and so forth. What thought did you give to guidelines, policy, restrictions around the use of that? Not so much on what should be said, but how one sets up channels, what policy you have around that, et cetera.
Yeah, so to start, you know, when Amaze actually rolls out, what the FAA can do is they can create these pre-existing groups already for, you know, incoming users to just join them accordingly. And then, you know, as more groups, you know, as time goes on and we find that we do need to add more groups, there is an add group button here where you can't just, you know, casually make groups. There would have to be an approval from someone in the FAA to make sure, you know, it's for work-related purposes. And another reason that we have the add group like that is, you know, if you do need to very loosely just message someone or a group of people, you can use the direct messages instead. So that way it's more, you know, personal communication rather than, you know, to multiple people. But, yeah.
Tyler, if I could just add, you answered it wonderfully. Just one more thing to add is in the sectors, the threads related to the sectors, you'll see here that this is where so there would be a new thread for each sector. So if I'm working in Jacksonville, or my focus is kind of the Southeast, and I want to be in the Jacksonville thread, that's what that one's for. But if I'm interested in other sectors, I can just search for it. And all those, there would be a thread for each sector. And in that settings menu there, we have a section for user profile. And in that user profile, users can select which regions are their preference. Depending on their selected region of interest or their preferences, Amaze will automatically enroll you in those threads. But if you choose, you can enroll in more threads.
So I have a question. You showed an example of where a traffic manager gets interrupted because an alert came in. How are you handling that interrupted thought of the TMC? Because you cleaned up and you closed the initiated actions, are you then saving that as a draft? And how does the TMC pick up on that after you finish this?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. Tyler, do you want to take a
Yeah, sure. So already off the bat, if users would like to save what they've just created or implemented, simply giving it a name will allow them to just search for it and then continue to work on it. And then the question I was asked earlier regarding saving the workflows, if it is cloud-based, it would be just the same. Instead of removing that data card, you would just simply create a new tab, start working from there, so you don't lose everything you previously had. But there are also other ways we can go about saving those that we'll definitely think about.
Yeah, and just to add, really kind of the main purpose of removing that data card was just to highlight some of the space saving functionality of Amaze. We know space is a really valuable real estate, or sorry, screen space is valuable real estate. And so we're all about giving users options to control what's displayed. And so really that was kind of the main purpose of demoing that. And kind of the last piece of your question, I think, is getting at kind of notification fatigue. So the way we target that is by default, our chat threads are muted. And so all the user will see is just a red circle with a notification of the number of new messages. If users choose, they can emphasize, exactly just like that right there. And then if users choose, they can emphasize certain threads. So in this case, we had the Jacksonville thread emphasized. That's why we received that chat message there.
So just to confirm, if the user is kind of multitasking, let's say they've got, they need 3 different maps set up for 3 different scenarios, you see that as 3 different tabs?
So I believe in cloud-based, it would be 3 different tabs. We haven't really we've thought about how our product can work on desktop and web browser. So definitely in web browser, you would probably be making more tabs, getting some inspiration from the first group, having sub-tabs that could also be a solution. But as of right now, it would be separate tabs.
Okay.
And then the other thing is in the evaluating workflow, you can have multiple kind of data cards on that right monitor if you wanted to monitor multiple regions of airspace.
Yeah, your idea with the data cards is excellent. And I will also say your integration is really nice. The fact that you really kind of now abstracted. There's not these silos that talk to each other. It's all one. It truly looks like one application.
Thank you so much. That was exactly our main focus, and that was a really, really big challenge for our team because we know this is such a complex.
And even it's helpful to just wipe the slate clean and not even use those old names, because people then think of these little silos constantly.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was to echo on Miro. That was something that stood out. You at one point had demoed seeing multiple TMIs, and you already have TMIs that are impacting a certain space. That can be, right here. That can be difficult to keep track of, and when you're monitoring a situation, especially if there's any pop-ups as they come in. I was wondering if you do have a pop-up that comes in, say from the external system, so it automatically would populate here and then populate on the map, right? So they don't need to accept their, let's say there's another local miles and trail, or an airport goes into a ground stop or something, that would just automatically populate here, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. These were just some sample kind of example like TMIs or things that could be affecting kind of airways or different parts of the nest. But exactly, it would automatically pop up right here.
Yeah, and again, having these all in one place, different TMIs can impact what you're doing in different ways. So this was, I jotted it down. This is great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, when we were speaking with Jen, we were just amazed at how her brain is able to process so much different information. And so the challenge for us as a team was how do we simplify that and condense that to give you kind of the TLDR. So.
Other questions from our panel?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Many thoughts, many questions. I was initially hesitant about the communications, and I think what is being presented, the more that I am getting up to speed with how this is being envisioned, is faster communications and more precision and documenting the time and the nature of the issue and who has the concern. So started imagining kind of like a Twitter dashboard, someone hashtag military operations, and then at the end of the day, you'd be able to sort and start to connect the dots, especially as many of these events are multifaceted. So that leads me to my main question, which is the constraint summary. It seems like there's a lot that has to be accurate in the constraint summary. And so could you elaborate more on, are there any dependencies there? And also, who is responsible for defining the constraint?
So in terms of the constraint summary, we kind of envision this as kind of more on the data or the backend infrastructure of FMDS. So this constraint summary would be pulling kind of from the ops plan or other sources of data that where kind of constraints are published. And so Amaze would kind of be tapping into that information and kind of concisely summarize that in one place.
And real quick, just to add on to that, this also relates to the last question, but in the data links up there, NCMS do have access to see, if things are up to date versus if things are, you may need to proceed with caution. So we are envisioning it as of right now where it is, kind of we're being provided this data, but, more research could go to show that this is not something for us to, define exactly what constraints are in each sector. Having that, we can easily make predefined lists to incorporate that.
Yes, thank you for elaborating. That was the perspectives that came to mind, and it's great to see that you are thinking about that as well.
Thank you so much.
Other questions from our judging panel?
So I did want to also compliment you guys on the dashboard view and the fact that it has a map. Having worked with controllers and traffic managers for many years, they're very visual people, so having the map there, not just a bunch of text, I think is a good add-on. And the settings that allow you to configure your own quick keys. I mean, I think I know some folks who would love to have that today. There are some settings in there probably that you might want to be careful with. So what were your thoughts on like the colors? What would you have settings, individualized settings for color on, and what kinds of things would you not include in that?
Absolutely. So just if we could pull up the settings, Tyler. Might take a moment. And sorry, just to clarify, were you referring to the color of in the notifications tab or the color on the map section of settings? And we'll pull that up in a moment.
So in wherever you give the user color options, how did you decide which kinds of things they should have options for, and were there any things that you would say they should not have options for?
Yeah, so to start with notifications like in the NTML bar or in the collaboration feature, we're allowing them to almost essentially choose any color, since it's their workflow, their workspace. We want it to be as personalized as possible. So, if some person has purple as their color of attention versus someone has pink, they're able to select that. For things like the map, so in discussions with Jen Ross, we learned that more often than not, plain colors can represent, arrival destination, right? You don't need to click and see the information. You can just tell by visually looking at it. And we did learn that sometimes, to one person, purple might represent arrival in CJX, but to another, it's not necessarily the case. So we do allow users to customize these, but we are aware that there are some, presets almost that already do exist. So we would almost incorporate those from the start, and then from there, users can further customize.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the customization of colors here are really meant to be kind of used as filters locally for your view of Amaze. And we actually observed this when we were observing Jen Ross. We noticed that she kind of had a similar functionality with the TFMS application where you can change the plain color depending on different parameters. So that's kind of really the idea we were going for here. But this would not be changing like global colors. And then on the notification side of things, this is really just in what color do you want to be alerted in? That's really kind of the extent of the customization. kind of on the flip side, if you look at our data card, for example, the colors there are not customizable. So we are intentionally selecting green as the color for you've resolved the demand capacity imbalance because green is associated with something that is good. And so same thing with like if it were to be a red color. And we also allow users to confirm that kind of both the sender and the receiver are seeing the same thing through this chat thread, right? So if I sent this data card, I know I can see what I sent and the person on the other side can see that same data card. So you have kind of that confidence that you're both looking at the same thing.
And real quick, thank you for bringing up the dashboard, and thank you all for providing Kurt Kaler as a source of contact for us. When we were meeting with Kurt, he walked through essentially an NTMS's day from start to finish, and we saw that they do start more often than not going to the NAS status dashboard to receive updates from when they last came. So thank you for Kurt. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had to commend you guys for doing the background research. One of the hardest things, I think, working in NAS automation and system updates and moving the FAA and systems forward, especially for traffic flow management. The hardest thing, I think, again, from an engineering perspective, is taking what they do today, taking the system they do today, and say, how can we improve this? But you have to judge what to keep and what to improve on, and that's very difficult for even us, in the FAA. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You might have said this during your presentation, but in one of the other views you showed, it looked like a slider to adjust the time.
I think that's an evaluation. Yeah.
There, among other things, right? Does that look ahead or just backwards or both?
This looks both at both. So the idea is you can use that layers drop down, for example, if you wanted to overlay weather and see how the weather is changing over time. But with that forecast bar, you are able to look ahead in time as well as look at historical data to kind of see how things are evolving over time.
So that's meant to have, thank you, and that's meant therefore not only to look at weather, but you're talking about predictive information, assuming the backend has the predictive information about what flights are going to be doing and so forth. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. Because we also learned that what happens in the past kind of will influence what happens in the future because everything is so interconnected.
One more question about the NTML. There was a bullet about NTML automation assist. And then looking at the NTML itself, the visual looked kind of sparse. So could you elaborate more on the concept or how you envision that piece?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. So something we wanted to focus on with NTML, or let's start with what the users said. So during our conversations with Ralph, he was a former STMC in N90. One of the things he mentioned about NTML is that it can be really overwhelming to kind of log all this information. So our challenge as a team was, how do we take as much of the logging burden off of the user as possible? That's where the automation comes in. And we see, so first of all, with the current information that's shown, that's kind of showing you the low-hanging fruit of what can be automated easily, which is all of the parameters you're putting in when you're modeling the AFP, the rate, the start time, the altitude, etc. And so all of that will be pushed to NTML and kind of help ease the burden off of there. For more detailed rationale, we do see an opportunity for potentially like AI assisted logging, but we also retain that text box if the user prefers to manually type something in or elaborate on something. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does, and it also explains the sparse frontal design of the NTML as you displayed. So there is quite a bit to be said about taking the load off with logging itself, but also making that information accessible when it's needed for. So yeah, I think that answers the question thoroughly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just one last thing to kind of relate it to NTML. Something that's really valuable in post-event review is being able to quickly retrieve data from maybe similar events or whatnot. Now that's really difficult if you have only free text logging, or if you're primarily relying on free text logging. That's because there's about 50 different ways to describe weather, right? You could say convective weather, WX, scary clouds, right? And so I think one of kind of the things our team was exploring is, can we create a closed set of kind of rationale for why this event occurred? And by doing that, you're able to kind of index your data much more easily. And now when you search for, now everyone's speaking the same language, because when I search for weather, I do get everything, you know, all of the logs related to weather. I don't have to search for WX or, you know, any other way to describe severe weather.
Other questions from our panel?
Yeah, I noticed that when you started to create a new card, that you were actually hiding information about other constraints that already existed. Did you do that on purpose, or is that something that you would think of improving? Because creating that card, I'm just thinking out loud, is going to be influenced by what already exists in terms of constraints in other areas. So.
Sorry, just to make sure we understand your question, are you asking about kind of including the constraint that drove the creation of the card, of the data card?
No, in fact, I'm talking about the other constraints like weather, and I think you had a space launch in there. They disappeared when the TMC started to create a new constraint, new card.
Yes. Do you want to take that, Tyler?
So there are some times where it will fully clear the you know, what's on the map. But there are times too that we've started to work with where, you know, in something like evaluating to modeling, when it's the same thing that you're seeing, right, it makes sense to continue to see those overlays. So for something like that, when you're continuing with the same object, we do continue to show those overlaid. But to your point, there are also, you may see weather and think of something else. So maybe we can talk about keeping it always there.
So just to add, I think during the drawing tool, the layers or the weather and whatnot kind of clears. That was deliberately done so the user can focus purely on kind of drawing the FEA to reduce the visual clutter. Now, if it is more desirable for users to be able to see those, we could absolutely keep those on there. But this was really mainly to kind of clear your workspace and, you know, make the process easier.
So to that point, when drawing an FEA, it's often very useful, I think, to see the weather because you're trying to draw the outline of where the weather is.
That's absolutely something we can do. Yeah, thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. Other questions?
So I have one more, and that is, I noticed that you have the NTML as a separate pull-up at the bottom. What made you decide to put it there rather than putting it at the top?
Well, I think after getting a lot of feedback from our user interviews, we decided to put it on the bottom because people were saying that they access the NTML constantly, right? So rather than having them to like navigate to a whole nav bar and click on a different icon, they can just simply pull up the NTML and directly see what's been updated, what's new, and what to be aware of.
And we also feel that a majority of the NTMS's time will be on the left monitor. So one thing that we did, right, we put this this collapsible NTML there so that while they're looking at the map, they don't have to look to the right monitor to view NTML. They can stay on that screen. But let's say that they did want to view a larger version of NTML on that right screen. That's actually what this button will do. Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing there, if you switch back to the left monitor, just the last thing I would add is that by having it live on the bottom left there, it will appear throughout the 3 core functionalities: evaluating, modeling, monitoring. So it didn't really make sense, or it was more logical to kind of put it here on the bottom left as opposed to the global nav bar.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Okay. We will check on you again in a moment, but from our in-person audience, do we have any questions for the team?
Hi, I'm Sophia from the University of Miami. Well, first of all, I want to say amazing research efforts. I don't know why you guys didn't say that. It's amazing. I love all the
Thank you.
research. I love seeing research-based designs. But I do have a couple of questions. I'll do one and see whoever has one. I know that you guys are doing dual monitor, so you're populating information on the right screen. What would you see that looking like if I have a single screen?
So that's the thing. So when thinking about how this would be on single monitor, we felt that things could get too cluttered, right? TFMS currently consists of 20 plus applications. I believe the exact number is around 57. Being able to combine those all into one interface is definitely a challenge, right? There are definitely ways to think about it, but part of our user research also showed that a lot of NTMS do have a dual monitor setup already. So thinking that they already have the resources, let's try and think about how it would look on one screen. But if we were to do a cloud-based system on web-based, you would be able to open FMDS on one screen. You could either split it, right, make two windows, make them side by side, or we, continue to work on some other functionalities to be able to view it on a single screen. Yeah.
The last thing I would add to that is, you can do really kind of a lot of work on the left monitor. Really where the right monitor comes in is for that collaboration tool, as well as if you're working with multiple data cards, so you're kind of multitasking or want to do easy comparisons. That's why we give the users the ability to take advantage of that right monitor. So.
Can I ask another question? Okay. You guys keep mentioning web-based applications, and I was wondering why web-based and not having a network native that is more safer and offers greater security.
So actually at this point, one of the feedback we got from the CDR was just discussing the feasibility of web-based versus desktop. We believe at this point it could be either, but just to kind of, emphasize certain features that we talked about, we just mentioned web-based. But, as it stands right now, this could be either desktop or web-based browsing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I am Seth from Brigham Young University. Great job. I love a lot of your ideas. I had one question about the top level navigation there, and also how that might work across two screens. It looked like you split the navigation, I think, is what's happening when you have the second screen. And yeah, go ahead. And then I just had a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, so the only things that are on both of these navigation bars are settings and help. The left monitor only has these three, and then the right monitor will only have the NTML logo. And then in terms of the top right of each monitor, so this is actually used to minimize chat if NTMS do need even more space to view the data cards. And then on the left, this is purely to swap between evaluating, modeling, and monitoring, so it won't affect the right monitor.
Okay. And then I was just also wondering, as a user, would I have the ability to add labels to like each of those icons, or is there like a show hide? Have you given any thought to that?
I think that's a really good point that we didn't consider, but it's definitely something that we can add on in our settings menu later on if they would like to do that. But in our user tests, so we tested with like people that have used TFMS for a very long time, and when they were like navigating across our application, they didn't seem to have a lot of problem identifying the icons. But I definitely understand what you're trying to say.
We have time for one more question.
I just have a question about your approach if this is web-based. You said it's two monitors, but say I want to use my laptop to open it. How do you imagine that working?
Yeah, so in that case, it would kind of be like a two-tab setup. So kind of similar to like if you're using Gmail, you click on the menu and you can open Google Drive, and that would open it in another tab. So that's potentially one idea for that. But more user research would kind of help kind of guide what the best way to handle that would be. But when NTMSs are kind of managing air traffic, they very, very often have access to more than one monitor. So that's kind of the use case we based our design on.
Cool, thank you.
And thank you, University of Michigan at Ann Arbor team. For our live stream audience, I wanted to thank you for joining us for our morning presentations and invite you to join us again after lunch. We'll be starting at 1:20 with Brigham Young University and their project MOA. And until then, we will see you after lunch.